Welcome to another movie plot and enjoy the memories. We open a decade after the vampire Count Dracula was slain by Van Helsing. The villagers of Transylvania still take no chances, so they run wooden stakes through the hearts of their dead just to be sure. A priest tells a weeping mother that they must do this to save her child's immortal soul, but the backwoods funeral is interrupted by a rifle-wielding monk riding a horse. Dressed like a battle wizard, Father Sandor is the resident vampire expert and pushes this dweeb out of the way. Not seeing any bites on the corpse's neck, he calls the priest an idiot because this woman just died from dysentery or something. The monk then visits the nearby tavern where wealthy British aristocrat Charles has just bought everyone around. He's traveling the Carpathians with his simple wife Diana, complaining stepsister Helen, and boring brother Alan. Sandor sees garlic hanging from the ceiling 10 years after the last vampire attack, so he tosses it at some random patron. He then dries off his soggy posterior beside our new tourist, so you bet this place is getting a scathing review. The monk then gets drunk on claret and begins showing off his rifle, which he says uses divine intervention to put dinner on the table. The English are here simply because traveling broadens the mind, but Sandor says that you'll learn more from the garlic than these people. He invites them to stay at his monastery, but Helen is a stickler for itineraries and says they must be in Carlsbad tomorrow. Sandor only mentions staying away from the castle because if these people want to visit Dracula's hometown, then good riddance. It turns out there isn't even a castle on the map, so that silly priest must have just drunk too many earthly pleasures. The next morning the couples get dropped over a mile outside of Carlsbad by the coach driver because he isn't going any closer to that place. When Charles tries to argue with him, this man pulls out a knife, so they assume he's about to rob them of their luggage. But he doesn't want any of their crap and throws it on the ground, saying that he'll return in the morning to see if they're still alive. There just so happens to be a castle nearby, but remembering Sandor's warning, they choose to stay in a cabin in the woods where nothing bad ever happens. Just then another coach arrives, but there's no driver, so our group think they've just scored big and perform a little grand theft carriage. However, the beasts pulling this thing don't respond to Charles's commands, and instead of going into town, it takes them to the animal's home. Arriving at the mysterious castle, the horses finally stop, which is when I'd get out and run, but this lot are airheads. They just decide to check if anybody's home by opening the door, but nobody seems to be around, so walk straight into somebody's house. Helen's the only one objecting to all of this fun, but it's too late now because the door slammed closed and locks the four inside. They find place settings on the dining room table, and all their luggage has been brought into the guest rooms right under their snobby noses. It's all been prepared by the shadow-lurking caretaker Klove, who Helen screams in the face of and really needs to pull herself together. The other three accept this weirdo's hospitality, who must have slammed the door when they arrived and ran upstairs with the luggage. Klove explains that his master left orders for him to keep the place perpetually ready to receive guests who get stranded at the crossroads. He outright says that his name was Dracula, but nobody's heard of him because European villagers always deliver their warnings through vague riddles. They even toast to Dracula while Helen continues to be ignored, yet she has an almost supernatural ability to be annoyingly correct. She even tells Alan that night that if they stay in this castle there won't be a morning for them, but he just says, "Shut up, woman." Diana begins to also get nervous, but Charles quells any fear with a there honey, you're only being hysterical. At least they're not the pair being creeped on by the caretaker, who that night Helen is woken up by skulking around outside their door. Alan checks to find Klove dragging a large trunk down the hallway, so instead of letting this man do his work, he decides to follow him. Leaving Helen in the room, he pursues him behind a tapestry into an underground chamber where Dracula's clothing sits waiting his return. His sarcophagus is empty, but when Alan checks what's behind curtain number 1, it's a knife-wielding caretaker with a backstab. Klove kills the guest, then strings him up above the tomb by his ankles before pouring in a bunch of ashes that I don't think are cigarette. He bleeds Alan onto the ashes in a resurrection ritual that's mostly guesswork, and the Prince of Darkness returns through 12 overlapping dissolves. While a naked Dracula puts his stake away, Klove tells Helen to come quick, your husband tripped over and fell into a deadly ritual. Upon seeing Al strung up, the widow has her suspicions of foul play, but is cornered by the Count after some devil's lettuce. He's still hungry after her whole husband, so drinks Helen for dessert, then goes to sleep without even cleaning up. In the morning, Charles and Diana find the pair missing, so the woman says, "Let's get out of here," because the man is dumb. So dumb in fact that he leaves Diana at the cabin in the woods to return to the castle to search for the others. If anything did kill this man's brother, he sure isn't prepared for it, but somehow Sherlock finds the hidden tapestry entrance to Dracula's crypt. He doesn't see the Count lying there with the lid open and is distracted by the corpse stuffed into a trunk. Then upon confirming that yep, that's a corpse all right, he runs away. Meanwhile, Klove arrives at the cabin and says that Charles sent him to bring Diana back to the castle, so she goes with the red flag. Upon entering, this rapscallion slams the door behind her as Diana is offered up to Dracula as his third full English breakfast of the day. However, the sister tries to claim this one for herself as Helen has also become a blood-sucking creature of the night. This pisses off Dracula, but he doesn't say a single word through the whole movie and tries to drag away his food like an animal. Charles enters to rescue her, so Helen uses her powers of vampire seduction on him, but they don't work on brother-in-laws. Dracula asserts his dominance over Charles with a push, so this brave idiot grabs a display sword off the wall to fight him. He just breaks it in half and is about to kill Charles when Diana's cross touches Helen's arm, so the pair learn the vampire's weakness. Charles uses the broken sword because crossing them apparently makes it a religious artifact, and they move towards the front door. The human Klove is immune to crosses but not a punch in the face, so Charles and Diana escape on the butler's carriage. This silly beast runs straight off the road, throwing the pair onto the ground and knocking out Di, who now needs to be carried around. Charles eventually drops her on her head right outside of Sandor's monastery, where the monk says, "I told you so." To be fair, he didn't say anything about the ritual or vampires, so he could have said a bit more since he knew about both. He says that since it was Charles' brother, he has to be the one to kill the Prince of Darkness, but I don't know where any of these rules are written. The monk says that Diana will be safe here, but then we meet their bookkeeper Ludwig, who's an insect-sucking Renfield ripoff of a familiar. Immediately after getting introduced to him, he's psychically told to begin making a way for his master to enter the monastery. Dracula throws his clingy bride to the ground, but then has to lay beside her the whole journey to the abbey as Klove delivers them by freight. He gets denied entry, however, because nobody believes those two human-shaped boxes in the carriage are full of books. Unfortunately, Ludwig invites the vampires in through a side door, and Helen goes to the window of her acute sister-in-law. Diana seems to have already forgotten the whole vampire thing and invites her inside, so she kinda deserves this bite. Dracula pulls Helen away, still bickering over their meal, but scatters when the lights come on like a bloodthirsty roach. The fangs didn't go deep enough to infect Diana with death, and the hunting monks have caught a wild Helen in the stables. She's behaving like a rabid dog, so Sandor tells the boys to hold her still because he's got a pointy little present. Helen looks at the camera like, oh crap, then is put out of her misery or brutally murdered depending on your diet. While everyone's distracted, Ludwig knocks out the monk guarding Diana's door, then defeats the one inside with a talk to the hand. This woman falls for the exact same trick that she did the last time, as Ludwig tells her she has an appointment with Dr. Dracula. By the time she realizes this isn't her regular gynecologist, it's too late, as Dracula almost bursts a blood vessel, hypnotizing her. He forces her to take it off, but only the cross, then gets out his own chest and tells her to suckle his blood. Dracula hears a noise and gets spooked again, so grabs his woman and runs away while leaving Ludwig behind. The monks drag him away, never to be seen again, while the boys go hunt themselves a bloodsucker and possibly save a bride. Sandor gives Charles his prized rifle, but when he says I can't accept it, the monk says it's useless against vampires anyway. That Sandor's always trolling, but Charles brings it just in case they run into that cretinous familiar, and wouldn't you know it, he's racing towards Dracula's castle, so the boys take a shortcut, allowing them to get in front and be like, oh fancy seeing you here. Klove goes to throw his knife, so Charles shoots him, but this guy was only for decoration, as the horses take themselves home anyway. Arriving at the castle, Dracula's coffin's thrown from the back of the carriage and lands nicely on the frozen moat. Diana is rescued safely with a story to tell the grandkids, while Charles still has the daunting task of slaying Old Man Fang. He bursts from his coffin and the two begin fighting, so Sandor spends about 20 seconds shooting the ground with Dracula running in circles. The ice then cracks beneath him and the Dark Lord's feet turn into wheels as his grip strength fails him and he sinks into the water. That's apparently enough to defeat Dracula, who never learned to swim despite 3 out of 4 panels on his family crest being nautical. And the movie ends.